Today on the Melbourne Report, a swing to the right. The government wants you to decide its sentencing laws, but is it a publicity stunt? We'll cross shortly to the Attorney General. Road to nowhere, an auditor questions the point of the Frankston bypass and the future of Victoria's film industry. Is there any reason to party? On Sky News and the Melbourne Channel, the Melbourne Report starts now.
From the Sky News Melbourne studios in South Bank, this is the Melbourne Report with Ahron.
Hello and welcome to the program. Also today, we speak with a New York man who dedicates his life to Lego, if only life could be that simple. Joining me at the desk today, Herald Sun columnist and RMIT lecturer Jill Singer, Melbourne comedian Peter Moon and the federal member for Higgins, Kelly O'Dwyer. But we start today with the issue of law and order and the government's policy that puts you in the judge's seat. The government will use the result of the survey to find out what the public thinks about its sentencing laws. It's one of 3 policies announced this week. There'll be a 2-year minimum for young criminals convicted of serious crime, and police powers will be extended so officers can fine people who swear in public. But first, we're joined by the Attorney General Robert Clark from Parliament House. Mr Clark, thanks for your time. We'll start first with the 2-year sentencing for young criminals. Is it too tough, and will it spark a generation of angry boys?
Well, what we are introducing is a statutory minimum period of detention of 2 years for 16 or 17-year-old offenders who commit crimes of gross violence. And I need to make it clear, it is confined specifically to those who commit the sort of outrageous acts of extreme violence that people see on the CCTV screens on their evening news bulletins from time to time, where innocent victims are set upon, beaten, knocked unconscious. No one wants to send anyone to jail, but there are times when there's extreme violence like this that the community needs to be protected and offenders need to be put behind bars, both as a deterrent and to keep the community safe.
But isn't this something the court should do, and are you effectively taking the power away from Victoria's judges?
This is not mandatory sentencing. We are referring to it as statutory minimum sentences. There will be an exceptional circumstances provision, but we do want to make sure that it's a genuine exceptional circumstances provision, not the sort of wide open loophole that the Labor Party left in their suspended sentences legislation back in 2006.
You also say you're extending the powers for police so that they can fine people who swear in public. Why are you going down this path?
This change is in fact simply confirming what the position has been in Victoria for the last 3 years. The previous government introduced a trial program where police could issue infringement notices, on-the-spot fines for offences such as offensive behaviour and the use of indecent language. The results have shown that that trial has been successful in stopping the sort of offensive, obnoxious, loudmouthed behaviour that makes life unpleasant for other people out and about in public places, and also freeing up police time so that they can be tackling other serious crimes on our streets. This is part of sending the message that obnoxious, antisocial behaviour is unacceptable. It confirms the position that's been trialled for the past 3 years and will ensure the police continue to have the powers they need to keep our streets safe and to make them pleasant places for ordinary citizens to go about their work and their recreational lives.
Attorney General Robert Clark, thank you.
Thanks, Ahron.
Well, there's always another side of the debate, and we shift from Parliament House, zip across to East Melbourne, where we're joined by Spencer Zifkak, the President of Liberty Victoria. Spencer, we've just heard from the Attorney General who wants the people to decide on the sentencing laws. What do you think of the move?
Well, I'm fully supportive of consulting the general public about sentencing issues, but I think if that's going to be done, it has to be done properly. And the idea that any sort of independent survey or independent opinion will arise from a questionnaire that's an insert into the Herald Sun alone will not produce the kind of proper, effective and independent results that one would require prior to the government taking action on the basis of public opinion.
Do you think the public has the right knowledge of the court system, of the judicial system, to make these decisions?
Well, I think the public has a keen interest in the judicial system, but I think it takes more than just an intelligent outsider's view to make decisions about what sentences are appropriate in particular circumstances. That's a task that has traditionally been given to the judiciary, and I think it's a task that the judiciary has to remain responsible for.
Spencer, there are many, particularly those within the Liberal Party, who believe the pendulum swung too far to the left in the judicial system over the past 11 years under Labor. Do you agree with that?
Look, I think that's very difficult to say. The reason for that is that it's often claimed that the judiciary has been too lenient in sentencing offenders, and in some cases that is probably true. But where the judiciary has issued a heavy penalty on someone, that matter is never reported. So my own view is that the judiciary will sometimes make mistakes, but in the vast majority of cases the judiciary will get it correct, and in fact such independent analysis of judicial decisions as has been undertaken makes it pretty clear that juries, when asked, in 90% of cases say that the judges got it pretty much right.
We've seen cases just recently where victim impact statements haven't been read out in court. Do you think that it's that sort of thing that has meant that this move by the government really was just inevitable?
Well, I think you've got to distinguish the two issues. Here again, if victim impact statements have not been read at court, then obviously that will cause hurt and upset to the victims concerned. So I wouldn't support that. If there is a victim impact statement, of course it should be read in court, and of course it should be taken into consideration by the judge in sentencing. But I don't think we can generalise about the operation of the criminal justice system just from that one instance.
The two sides of the debate there. Spencer Zifkak from Liberty Victoria, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, Kelly, is the government right to ask the people what they want when it comes to sentencing laws?
I think it's absolutely important to ask people what they think appropriate sentencing should be. The government ultimately will come to their own decision as to what is appropriate, but I think that's an entirely good thing. I think you should be asking the state's residents what they think is appropriate sentencing in certain circumstances.
Didn't they do that during the election, though, given the fact that it was, I suppose, a poll on law and order?
Well, this is a comprehensive survey. I don't see any problem with it. In fact, I think it's actually a very, very good thing. I think that these sentencing laws should be reviewed from time to time to make sure it's in line with community expectations.
Peter, what are your thoughts? Does the government actually listen to people here, or is it just to make us think that they do?
I don't know why they're doing it, but to be perfectly honest, I think, Kelly, respectfully, I think what you just said is a load of bollocks.
I don't think you can say that respectfully, Peter.
No, well, I mean, things like mandatory sentencing has proved to be an absolute disgrace, and these sorts of decisions about whether, what is best for someone, they're quite complicated decisions, and if you take it into
so you shouldn't ask people what they think about it?
You can ask people what they think, but I personally believe that you need a legal system that's professional and responsive to the individual needs and.
But nobody's arguing it shouldn't be like that.
Well, what tends to happen is that you get a big circus about, I flog him, throw him in jail, throw away the key and stuff like that. And that is, we need a more intelligent approach to law and order than that. We actually need to be looking at things like the drug laws and the whole thing and trying to work out exactly what's happening. I mean, the level of debate on law and order issues is appalling.
But that's why they're having a survey, so they can actually ask people, talk about their different perspectives.
Personally, I would rather they ask someone who knows what they're talking about than asking me about it.
Jill, what do you think?
I think it's absolutely farcical, and we've seen it before. Jeff Kennett did it in 1985. He put a survey, and it was in the Herald Sun, and there was quite a fuss then. If you're going to try and canvass public opinion, you need to canvass everyone's opinion. You don't do it in a narrow way which encourages a certain response. And often with online responses, you get certain people who want to take part in this, and they're going to be more vocal of a certain point. This is the sort of survey you do when you know the answer you want. I agree that there may well be legitimate concerns about sentencing in the state, and there could be, I think, a need for a Law Reform Commission report into sentencing and a review. But I don't think this is the way you go about it. And it's this thing, it's a sop to make it look like people are being consulted, but it's a bit like reality TV. Do you want to vote them off? Do you want to chop his head off or something like this?
Which that's a great point, and it might make me a very unpopular host for saying this, but do the people actually know what they're talking about, Peter Moon, when it comes to sentencing? Obviously, people who are not in a court.
I'm one of the people, and I don't know. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about.
I think it's such an elitist thing to say that only certain people can have a view on sentencing. We all live in this community. I don't think people are too stupid.
But we have experts.
I think it's time we recognise that there are some people who've studied something and know all about it, have a little more,
I I think there are different points. It's whether the community has a right to a view, which I think they do. It's how you canvass that view, how informed they are, and what you do with that information. If you're going to use it to introduce mandatory sentencing, which takes away judicial discretion in sentencing, it's a massive issue for the state and has incredible implications for our criminal justice system. So if you're using it as an excuse for that, then I think it is extremely legitimate to raise concerns about this
But
survey.
what if people want that? I mean, you're saying, you know, what
Look,
if people actually
we
do
all
want
know
that?
that public opinion can be manipulated, and in fact that's what this is. This is like a push-pull survey. It's sort of like it's a chance for the government to look as though they're doing something. But frankly, you know, if I vote for someone, I want them to do the job.
Peter,
I don't want them to come back to me and say, what should I do? I mean, you know.
Do you think
If
that
you did a poll, Kelly, I would guarantee, if you did a poll, say...
a guaranteed poll, Jill?
Yeah, a guaranteed poll, that you could find a group of people who would say we should have capital punishment. You would find that. To his credit, Jeff Kennett used to say, I know this is popular and I'm not going to support it.
The government
Because-
ultimately makes their decision, but it's not wrong to canvass people's views.
I agree with you,
I
but
just
it's
don't
how
see what
you
the
do it.
conspiracy
Okay,
can
I
be
want to move
around.
on to the
Not as a
next point.
substitute for policy, though.
I want to
for
move on
good
to the next
policy.
point of this, which we heard from this week as well. 2 years sentencing for young criminals who commit serious crimes. Peter, will this create a generation of Chris Lilly's angry boys?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know if I'll be as funny as Chris Lilly, but no, I just think the mandatory sentencing is wrong to start with. I think we have to be, for example, just the simple thing.
The government's saying it's not mandatory, though. It's a very grey area. They're trying to tell us it's not mandatory. We've just heard from the Attorney
there's
General.
something
that
very
a 2-year
wrong with the
minimum.
prison system. We've got, large numbers of people. I mean, I don't know if this is still true, but I'm sure it is. Years ago, when I actually looked into this, you've got kids that are in children's homes. You know, that they make up a vast part of the prison population. People who are born into a culture of that leads them to prison. You've got a lot of drug users and people who've been all these things, and they're just getting worse and worse. And what they need to do is actually look at it carefully and try and come up with a better way, because the whole thing's it's just, as I say, it's just getting worse. We've got more and more imprisonment.
And there's no
it's getting us
evidence that it actually
nowhere. This
reduces
kind
crime.
of
Jill,
so
sing a
true.
final word, rehabilitation?
Oh, well, we have to focus on that, and I think as it is that there's insufficient rehabilitation. We've heard terrible stories that have come out of some of the youth detention facilities and the lack of rehabilitation for them. If you automatically start slamming 16 and 17-year-old angry boys into these facilities, they're going to emerge even harder and more troubled. I've noticed in New South Wales, church leader there has been doing a great program with young people in which he takes them out, and he said, look, you've got young angry blokes. He said you need to feed them and you need to give them a good run and work them hard and get this out. You don't lock them up with a lot of other troubled
They
kids.
feed them in jail, though.
Yeah.
Okay. While you're watching the Melbourne Report, there's plenty more to come after the break, including a report into the Frankston Freeway bypass and whether more roads really equals better traffic flow. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to the Melbourne Report. On the panel this week, Herald Sun columnist and RMIT lecturer Jill Singer, Melbourne comedian Peter Moon and the federal member for Higgins, Kelly O'Dwyer. This morning, for the third time in as many weeks, we woke up to leaks emanating from the Office of Police Integrity's probe into former Deputy Sir Ken Jones. It's emerged his phone is being tapped. Further to that, even though it's not surprising, it happens all the time, what is news is that the several Baillieu government advisors are also being tapped. And finally, the state's ombudsman is launching an investigation into the OPI's investigation. It is becoming a political mess. Jill Singer, we'll start with you. Is this investigation becoming a farce?
Absolutely farcical. It's devastating news, I think, for the police. It'll have quite a detrimental effect, I think, on Simon Overland at this time. I think there is a lot more to it, though. It's quite a matter of concern, I think, why the bugs were put in place. Obviously, there have been ongoing discussions between the government and Ken Jones, and it seems that there has been quite a lot of political interference in the police force. So we do have concerns here about the separation of powers and what's been going on, but it is actually devastating to learn that these bugs have been in place.
It isn't at all surprising, as I mentioned, that you've got Sir Ken's phone being tapped, but when you have a look at the Baillieu government advisors, I mean, that's kind of heading into a different path, isn't it, don't you think, Kelly?
Well, I think it's very concerning when you start tapping phones and you don't give good justifications for doing that.
It's not really surprising, though. It happens all the time with the OPI.
It's a really very serious. Well, actually, I mean, I think if it does happen all the time, I think that's quite a serious thing. To intercept somebody's telephone is a very serious thing. You need to ensure that there is no abuse of power in intercepting somebody's telephone, and I think it is quite concerning to see these reports in the paper today.
Peter, what are your thoughts on this? Because we now have a situation, as you say, an investigation into investigation. So you have the Chief Commissioner is under a probe, which we know has been launched by the Victorian government into senior police. We have the man who was meant to replace him, according to the Baillieu government. He has the OPI on his tail. Now the OPI who are investigating him have the Ombudsman on their tail, and the Ombudsman, that office is meant to be replaced in a couple of months' time. This is turning into a mess.
Well, look, I think there's got to be an investigation into this. What's happening is that the Baillieu government doesn't want Simon Overland, and so they and he is reciprocating in their effort, responding to their efforts to get rid of him by possibly using the Office of Police Integrity to try and to get rid of Ken Jones,
which is kind of backfired because now the OPI is looking at the government as well.
Well, I mean, you should only really have, I mean, for a start, Office of Police Integrity. There's not a lot of integrity involved in investigating someone when you don't have criminal grounds for any criminal suspicions, and you're just trying to. It's part of the office politics, that sort of thing.
It sounds kind of like what the Police Association would say.
There's really only one sort of person who should be allowed to, phone tap, and that's a Murdoch journalist, in my view.
We won't go there, but let's go to a Murdoch journalist. Do you think Simon Overland should be sacked?
No.
Why not?
I think he will be forced to leave. I do think there has been a campaign to get rid of him. I think that there have been problems, and I think he inherited a lot of problems. There's been an ongoing brawl with the police union and the whole culture of the way policing is being conducted in the state, whether it's a sort of more academic approach to crime and punishment or more cops on the beat,
Well, I don't want it to be academic. I want it to be more cops on the beat. I don't know about you. I don't want
sometimes
people
there can be a good
theorising
blend.
about it. I want to see a cop on the street if I'm in trouble.
Would you rather it be Simon Overland or Sir Ken Jones, though? What do you think, Kelly?
Well, look, I don't have a view as to who it should be, but I do think...
Are you surprised that Simon Overland's still there?
I am surprised Simon Overland is still there, because I don't think that you can preside over what is clearly a crisis that is going on at the moment in the Victorian Police. Now, this is not a crisis.
Then should the same then happen to the police minister as well?
Started today. This is a crisis that developed over the time of the Brumby government. They need to take full responsibility for that. And I think that...
What if he didn't start the crisis?
Well, no,
I mean, you don't just sack someone because there's a crisis. You find out what the crisis, who started the crisis, and
Well, I think what you need to do first and foremost is you need to restore some integrity and confidence.
But if the government wants to do that, why don't they just say what they don't like about Simon Overland? Give him a chance to defend himself. I mean, at the moment it seems we're all backdoors and people...
I'm not part of the Baillieu government, so I don't...
Well, I mean, to me that is the disturbing thing about it, that none of this is out in the public. People don't understand. There's speculation, and there's people being pilloried, investigated with no charges.
Well, the political appointment started, Christine Nixon was brought down from New South Wales. She was appointed. She was most clearly a political appointment. I mean, nobody can deny that. I mean, it's pretty clear that she was a political appointment. She did a job. Simon Overland was her deputy. The Baillieu government have inherited this current structure within the police force. I wish them all the best, because I think that they've inherited quite a difficult problem. You're right to say that there's been an issue with the police unions. You're right to say that there are clearly some tensions at the top, and the risk of getting my phone tapped. I think it needs to be sorted out.
Right. And yet the people of Victoria generally are pleased with the work of the police.
I think the police on the ground, I think they're absolutely, I think, people have great...
And can I just say as a final word, they'll be particularly pleased if the police start flashing their lights around speed cameras. Thanks for your topic on this one. Well, this week the Auditor-General has issued a scathing report into the expensive Frankston Freeway bypass. He basically asked whether it should be built at all. Susan Wilson hit St Kilda Road to find out what the public thinks, with your say.
This year, as always, the state budget pumped hundreds of millions of dollars into Victorian roads. But now experts have raised some serious questions about the value of some of those projects. So, have we got the balance right? We hit the streets of Melbourne to ask people if more money should be spent on Melbourne roads or on public transport.
Spend the money that they're taking off us on the roads.
People are coming late or organisations don't really understand.
I don't drive. I usually take public transport, and I'm not Australian. I'm from Thailand.
It's safer and more efficient and better for the environment if people use public transport than roads.
More cars on the road, obviously more carbon emissions in the atmosphere, whereas public transport is or will drive less pollution.
There was once a guy employed to tell the government how to make the roads safer by putting medium strips in and things like that. But that was too much money, so the money went somewhere else, I think.
Oh gosh, well probably public transport Melbourne being such a, I don't know, city and whatnot. I use the public transport, so yeah, public transport.
Well, about 10 years ago, Steve Brack signed off on a multi-million-dollar project to attract some of the world's biggest films to Melbourne. Victoria was losing out to New South Wales and to Queensland as the Americans started rocking up to make films here, and so the Dockland studios were built. They were meant to generate $100 million a year to the state's film industry, and while the real numbers are hard to come by, you can bet it never reached that target. 7 years after the opening, the Baillieu government is refusing to commit to a planned expansion of the studios and admits the complex will be a future drain on taxpayers. So, what is the future of Victoria's film industry? Well, Peter, $45,000 for a taxpayer-funded party. They can't be serious, surely.
No, I'm surprised they could do it for that, quite frankly. It's $45,000. I mean, most weddings cost, $100,000 these days.
So they should have spent more taxpayer funds.
Well, not really. Look, I have to say I'm a bit surprised because I've always found Film Victoria to be very, very tight with their money, especially when I've applied for any script development.
This conversation should help you apply
it does seem a lot. I mean, $45,000 for something like that. I think Sandra Srolik had been there 9 years or something, and she was much admired by the staff, and they wanted to,
say goodbye.
Yeah, or else maybe she organised herself. I don't know. But
if they're out there schmoozing the wider community and attracting more money, this wasn't.
Well, I think
it wasn't that. It was a sop, and it was actually a sop to the previous Labor government. They invited Labor identities. They did not invite the minister, and
if they'd invited Ted, no one would have said anything. You go, Ted.
No, I don't agree with that. I think
I don't either. It was just dumb of them.
It was dumb.
If they'd invited the current ministers, I think they would have said, particularly in light of the fact that the budget is tight. You actually do have genuine things that are not being funded because the budget is tight. To see this extravagant waste.
Absolutely.
Of
No, look, I agree with you, but I hope that they don't sort of cut the budget like you were saying. Yeah, it's difficult. I think writers need more support. But
remember
also
the film The Nugget? The Nugget got up and it was atrocious. But I remember seeing something and saying, and it was written in 6 weeks. God, blimey, isn't that great? I think it's atrocious.
I was in The Nugget, don't you?
No.
And we'll leave it there.
Did you write it?
No.
Thank God for that.
Thank you so much.
No, that's good, Jill. I admire your honesty. I mean, yeah.
Thank you so much to this week's panel.
Are you allowed to
Get your
punch
foot out of
other
your
members
mouth.
of the panel?
That's all right.
And finally this week, was there ever a happy childhood that didn't involve Lego? Most of us put down the bricks as we approached our teenage years, but for some very lucky individuals, they kept playing. Matt Bendel met one such man for this week's Out and About.
New York-based artist Nathan Sawaya makes art, but as you've never seen it before, creating life-size sculptures from pint-sized pieces.
Well, I started years ago creating out of more traditional media. I'd done sculptures out of clay, out of wire, and one day I just challenged myself to create a large-scale sculpture using this toy from my childhood, Lego bricks. So I did a piece that was kind of a self-portrait, and it got a great reaction from friends and family, and I just decided, well, I'll do a few more pieces. And soon I was getting commissions from all over the world, and I realized there's really something to this. So I quit my day job and became an artist full-time.
What was the breakthrough moment for your works?
Well, I suppose when I was a child, I was playing with Lego bricks, and I told my parents I wanted a dog, and they said, you can't have a dog. So I built myself a three-dimensional life-size dog out of Lego, and that may have been one of those first aha moments. As an adult, when I did my first exhibition in the US, and it got such a strong reaction, so many people came, I really realized there was something there, and so very excited to bring the exhibition to Australia for the first time.
And now that you've been to Australia, might we see a few Australian themes coming through in your works?
Well, a lot of these pieces here in the exhibition are some emotional pieces, some whimsical pieces, but I was able to work in one Aussie-related piece right before I came here. It's not too big, it had to fit in the luggage, but there's something here. I'm sure you can find it.
The Art of Brick is now showing at Federation Square, and this is Matt Bendel reporting for Out and About.
And there we go, Matt Bendel there, caught sitting around on the job. And that is the Melbourne Report for this week. If you missed the start of this show, you can always watch us again from now right across the weekend on the Sky News Melbourne channel. Just point your remote at channel 600. I'm Ahron Young in the Melbourne newsroom. Have a great weekend.